Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and today I'm going to be talking to you about adrenal fatigue and hypothyroid problems. Adrenal fatigue, hypothyroid, and MTHFR problems. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this. First of all, for all my Canadian friends and family, wishing you a happy Canadian day, and also my American family, happy 4th of July, and then all the rest of the world, happy day. So anyways, I call myself the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and today I want to talk to you about the problems of adrenal fatigue and hypothyroidism. And a lot of people think that I think it's my thyroid and it's my adrenals as a result of my thyroid, or I think it's my adrenals and then as a result of my adrenals, it's impacting my thyroid. And that's kind of true, but it's not 100% true. And what I want you to get the idea is that both of those problems are so far down the road from what's actually going on in your body that needs to be addressed first. And we'll get into that in a second. The other thing I want to say is that I can't put any mirrors behind me, or I can't do things backwards. Ultimately, I'm going to have to get someone to hold the camera for me so that I know I'm on the camera and I'm not halfway off if I have it facing the wrong way. But for now, you're just going to have to put up with the awesome content without having the words going in the right direction. Although it kind of looks like they're going in the right direction. But anyway, so let's talk to you about adrenal fatigue and hypothyroid / MTHFR. So the first thing I want to say is that 80% of hypothyroid problems, 80% of hypothyroid problems are an autoimmune based problem. So think about that for a second. 4 out of 5 people that have an underactive thyroid, it's because your immune system is causing an attack on your thyroid. You need to think about that. So what about taking TSH is going to fix that cause? What about taking Synthroid and Cytomel and levothyroxine and Nature Thyroid is going to fix that? What's going to fix that if you have an autoimmune problem? I get patients all the time that have been on these medications, probably like yourself, where a couple years go by and then they start chasing their tail and they're taking more thyroid, and then they take their blood test and they see that their TSH is like 0.001 and they're taking way too much, and then they get stressed and then they take their blood test and now it's shot up to 5.0. Sounds like you're chasing your tail. It sounds like you're playing whack-a-mole and you're hitting one thing and then another thing pops up, and then you're hitting one thing and another thing pops up. The sad part of that is that 80% of people with hypothyroid problems have an autoimmune-based problem. And I've had patients that have gone 10, 15, 20 years, and I ask them, well, how's your thyroid antibody levels? And they look at me like I have 2 heads. Like, what do you mean? I was like, well, didn't anyone ever test your thyroid antibodies? Like, I don't even know what thyroid antibodies are. And that's a shame, because the problem is that the medical model looks at TSH, which is a 50-year-old model, as a way to gauge how your thyroid is doing. And that's simply, limited thinking. How many boats are out in the ocean? Oh, there's none in the ocean. And then you take the blinders off and there's 7 or 8 different boats in the ocean that you never saw. And that's because you're only looking for one specific thing. How on earth can you see all the boats if you have blinders on? That's a big problem. And so 80% of people that have a hypothyroid problem are an autoimmune-based problem. So that means that the recovery strategy is not to just impact the thyroid. It's to impact what is causing the immune-based problem. And that could be an infection, that can be a genetic predisposition, that can be a mold exposure, that can be candida or yeast overgrowth, heavy metal toxicities, environmental pollutants, all of the above, blood sugar being unstable. All of that is going to cause the genetic susceptibility to cause itself to express itself. And that's the other thing. So if 80% of people that have a hypothyroid problem are an autoimmune-based problem, then I know that there's a methylation problem. How do I know that? Because if you have an autoimmune disease, you haven't been able to turn off the expression of your genetic susceptibility by the mere fact that your immune system is attacking its own tissues that it shouldn't be attacking. That means you have a methylation issue. That means that genetically speaking, your enzymes aren't producing energy at 100% effectiveness. So what does that mean? It means you put $1 in the coin machine, 3/4 come out, and you got to spend that to make energy. The problem is that when we are under stress and we have these heavy metal toxicities and these immune problems and these Epstein-Barr viruses and these all of these other stressors, you need that $1 to give you 4/4 so that you can put out all those little fires. But if you continually get 3/4 and 3/4 and 3/4 and you have not enough money to go around, guess what happens? You express an autoimmunity. So if you've expressed an autoimmunity and you have Hashimoto's, it means that not only do you have an immune-based problem, you have a susceptibility to not being able to make energy effectively. So now all of a sudden the MTHFR became very real. But here's the problem. Most doctors don't even know about MTHFR. So when they say you have an MTHFR problem, they say, hey, let's just get you on some methylfolate, or let's give you methylcobalamin, or let's just get you off of folic acid. And while those are good, those are, again, this type of thinking where you're not looking at all of the different gene SNPs. There's 23,000 different genes, and we that study this stuff don't even know a smidgen of what the problems are. But we know that cell membranes need to be repaired. We know that oxidative stress needs to be put out. We know that hormones need to be broken down effectively, and neurotransmitters need to be made properly, and your DNA needs to be recycled, and we need to be able to make antioxidants. And that's not just MTHFR. That is a whole bunch of other genetic SNPs that a lot of people don't even know about. So if you're wondering if you have a hypothyroid problem and you have Hashimoto's and you got off of gluten and you don't take dairy and you take methylfolate and you're wondering why it's not fixed, it's because you're doing this. You haven't even looked at most of the problems as to why you're not getting better. So the next thing I'd like to tell you is let's talk about 60%. So 60% of the active hormone, which is T3, is made in the liver. So I always use the example of the coffee bean and the coffee ground. So I don't just put the coffee bean in the coffee machine and expect it to make me good coffee. That's what T4 is. So when the thyroid gets the thyroid stimulating hormone that's not even made by the freaking thyroid, sorry for swearing, but that makes me so mad because so many people just get their TSH done and it's a value that's not even made in the thyroid. And it doesn't even tell us about what's going on in the thyroid per se. But anyways, 93% of the thyroid hormone that is made in the thyroid is T4. And that's the coffee bean. And 7% is T3, and that's the ground up form. 60% of T4 being converted to T3 is in the liver. So how is taking Synthroid and Cytomel and all of these things, even if some of them do have some T3, how is that going to fix the congestion and the detoxification issues and the fatty liver and all of the things that need to take place in the liver to convert that? It's not. That's the problem. And so guess where methylation takes place? 85% of methylation takes place in the liver. So wouldn't it make sense that we at least want to address the liver and figure out, is there a glucose issue? Is there a hormonal imbalance? Is there toxic exposures? Do we have enough fatty acids and cholesterol to help synthesize these things? I mean, that would take too much focus and planning and actually sitting down and asking your patient some questions about what's going wrong with them instead of looking at their blood tests and saying, oh, you're high here or you're low here, so let's get you on some antidepressants because you should be normal. You shouldn't be feeling this bad. And I got to go because my next patient's here, and don't let the door hit you on the way out. So anyways, 60% of that conversion needs to take place in the liver, and 20% needs to take place in the gut. So what happens if we have gut infections, we have dysbiosis, we have unhealthy, let's just say candida overgrowth, or there's biofilms, which most of you don't know about, which we'll talk about at some point. But basically what happens is we lose the ability to disinfect the food. So we can't squish acid and digestive enzymes to break it down. It sits there, it ferments, it creates this gastric reflux. We end up taking antacids or protein pump inhibitors, which is the exact opposite of what we need to be doing, because the food is sitting there not being able to be digested because there's not enough stomach acid. So let's come up with this brilliant idea and give you less acid so that you can have that food sit there even more and not being able to be broken down. And then all of a sudden, you're not converting 20% of the T4 into T3. So let's just give you some more thyroid hormone, and let's not even look at the gut, and let's not look at the liver. So those things are really, really important. Where does the adrenals come into play? So let's talk about the adrenals. So the connection, I would say, between the thyroid and the adrenals, it's kind of like the Hatfields and the McCoys. They're sort of these bitter rivals. And what happens is they're controlled by the same mechanism in the brain. So your hypothalamus tells the pituitary, says, hey, you got to put a couple more coals on the fire because it's getting cold in here. So then the pituitary sends its marching orders to the thyroid to make it produce T4 and T3. Or the hypothalamus says, hey, it's a stressful situation. You got to go tell the adrenals to go make some cortisol. And they'll tell the adrenals to make cortisol. Ultimately, what happens is the pituitary gets tired. It's always getting these marching orders. And so it's being told, go tell the thyroid, go tell the adrenals, go tell the thyroid, go tell the adrenals, go tell the ovaries, go tell the testicles, go do your work and tell all of these endocrine things that they need to do their work. Eventually, the pituitary gets tired. And as a result, it creates a TSH level that's low, or it creates a ACTH level that's low. And it's not the problem so much in the thyroid per se. It's the problem in the pituitary, or vice versa. It's not so much the problems in the adrenals, it's the problem with the pituitary. And the problem with that is that we don't actually measure the adrenals accurately when we do a cortisol test in the morning and see the different times of the day where it needs to fluctuate. Or we don't actually do an adrenal test properly when we do an ACTH test and send that to the adrenals to see if it's insufficient. What happens if we're not making enough ACTH, and then we do this test and give a person ACTH and say, oh, your adrenals are working fine? The problem with that is that your body's not able to make ACTH. So how are you going to say if the adrenals are working properly if they're making ACTH by giving it to you versus your own body's not able to make ACTH because the pituitary is tired? I know there's a lot of things going on. It just makes me so mad that we have this system upside down, and it's a matter of giving people pharmaceutical solutions instead of like getting to the root cause and, God forbid, not relying on these pharmaceutical solutions. But anyway, so the hypothalamus, the pituitary adrenals, the hypothalamus, pituitary thyroid, they are related by the marching orders. And so sometimes when the pituitary gets tired from telling the thyroid to do all this stuff, the adrenals suffer. Or vice versa, when the pituitary gets tired from the adrenals telling it to do all this stuff, the thyroid suffers. And so both of them impact each other. Another way that they impact each other is the thyroid basically helps with these secretions, these gastric secretions moving along the intestinal area. So if the thyroid's not working well, it's going to cause digestive problems in terms of just breaking things down and moving things along. Whereas the adrenals secrete or supply the secretory IgA, or the cortisol will deplete the secretory IgA. Those are the first lines of defense that lines the GI tract, where if we get stressed out, then all of a sudden we lose that ability to disinfect the food, and now these foodborne pathogens and molds and bacteria now start to impact the adrenals, and now this whole negative spiral takes place. Hopefully that makes sense. The other thing I wrote in here is methylation. So we talked about 23andMe and genetic testing and MTHFR. One of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about is the need to produce ATP. And that really happens at the cellular level. So a lot of us will be taking Synthroid and Cytomel and Armor and Nature-Throid and desiccated thyroids and all these different things. But your ATP generation way upstream is not being able to produce at an optimal level. So you're mistaking that as, oh, I got to have an underactive thyroid. But the same reasons that cause the stress to the adrenals and the stress to the thyroid and fatiguing the pituitary and causing the hypothalamus to give its marching orders are the same reasons that are going to cause the cells to break down from the cellular level. And that is all of the stress again. That's having to worry about finances and emotional relationships and physical injuries and traumas and balancing your blood sugar and having pesticide exposures and putting arsenic and cadmium and aluminum in things that we eat and put on our bodies every day, and then putting antibiotic residues and putting genetically modified foods in our food system so that we deplete the mineral stores in our body, and that's stressful too. Ultimately, what happens is we're not getting enough oxygen for the mitochondria to make ATP. And how is that going to be fixed by being put on thyroid? It's not going to fix that. And the problem with that is that when the mitochondria is not producing energy at an optimal level, it says, hey, thyroid, slow down. Hey, adrenals, slow down. We don't care so much about you. You guys got to, take your foot off the pedal, and we got to just conserve energy here. And we got to get to the root causes of the problem. And that means we got to control your stress. That means we got to, unplug. That means we can't have our cell phone on us all day. That means you got to go out and take a walk and breathe healthy air. That means you can't eat crappy foods and have things that are packaged and go to Walgreens and get a supplement and say that I'm taking supplements when it's all crap in there. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do that we actually we have to try to do healthy, or we have to try to be unhealthy. I'm actually going to give you a story. So this is when I first realized this lesson. I realized when I was in my first year undergraduate, I played for the varsity soccer team, and my goal was just to play for the soccer team. And yeah, I'd go to class here and there and do what I needed to do. And I remember thinking that my priority being, an athlete and having fun and going to the pubs and stuff like that was just to do enough to get by in school. And so I remember midterms. I remember thinking, okay, we have, 4 weeks of notes. We have this class 3 days a week. We have, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I need the 1st, I need the 3rd, and then I need the 5th, and then I need the 8th, and then I need the 10th and the 12th. And I remember looking through my notes thinking, okay, I got the 1st, I got the 7th, I got the 10th, and then I'll study from that. And I did really well on the stuff that I studied, but the stuff that I didn't study, I didn't do very well on. And then I remember thinking, waiting for my transcripts, my first year of college, and thinking, 60% of the people in my program didn't get in to the next year. And I remember 2 of my friends had already got the news that they weren't in, and I was freaking out. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to do this again. This sucks. I'm not going to try to do poorly, and I'll explain that in a second. And I got those transcripts, and I just remember thinking, may continue. And so what's the whole point of humbling myself and telling you about how crappy I did my first year of college was because I went out of my way to try to do poorly. I mean, I really did. I could have tried a little bit harder, but I went out of my way to try to do poorly. I mean, I didn't even go to class most of the time. I didn't get the notes that I needed to study for the lessons that we were learning. And I thought, I actually had to try to do bad. I mean, I had to go out of my way to do bad just as much as I have to go out of my way to do well. And it's the same thing with health. You have to go out of your way to do poorly. You're eating crappy food. When you're eating crappy food, it's crappy food. Or you're stressed all the time and you don't reinvest in your own health, and you don't take time to unplug slug and you're working 3 jobs and you're balancing the finances with taking little Johnny to school, with all the other things, you know that you're actually not maybe doing it on purpose, but you're trying hard to do unhealthy. And these are the things that cause these methylation cycles and the energy demands to be exposed for some of these genetic weak links that you have that ultimately are going to cause the expression. And that's where you're going to have 8 out of 10 people that have a hypothyroid problem being Hashimoto's, because they've expressed that genetic inheritance. They lost epigenetic control, and all of these things are causing oxidative stress. So I know I went a little bit on a tangent there, so I apologize, but hopefully you liked my story. And that's the relationship between adrenal fatigue and hypothyroid. That's the other thing I want you to look at too. Lastly is, I probably talked about 4 or 5 different mechanisms on how they're related. And the reality is there's probably 15 different mechanisms. And as long as I understand that my 4 or 5 may be some of the things that may be explaining the phenomena, but there's also the uncertainty of some of the things that I didn't explain. So how can I put all of my stock on my 5 theories that may not 100% be accurate, and then I follow the roadmap and I only find that I get 20% improvement? And I used the example last week where potentially you take a melatonin to try to get to sleep at night, and yeah, maybe your melatonin is depleted and you don't have enough melatonin to have a nice sleep-wake cycle and get into deep REM sleep, and so it might help. And it might help at the beginning. But when you have so much stress in your life, you have a major infection, your blood sugar is not balanced, your adrenals are not making cortisol, that's not being able to settle down stress, your body can't change its allostatic pressure, so you can't change temperatures, you can't increase your heart rate, you can't adapt to your surroundings, and you have gut breakdown, you have food sensitivities, your mitochondria is not able to make energy. How is taking melatonin going to fix that? It's not going to fix all of those things. So I just, hopefully by doing these Facebook Live sessions, I give you another way to think about things and that's really my goal. My goal is to do a paradigm shift where it's good that our blood tests are normal. Not good because the doctors think we're crazy when we feel crappy, but it's good because we are not our blood tests. We are us. And our blood tests being normal, because our body's really good at maintaining a good environment. It's good at maintaining a certain pH or a certain temperature. I mean, geez, our body has to maintain a certain percentage, with 1 or 2 degrees, a certain temperature, and that's for everybody. I mean, our body does a good job of regulating its external environment from a blood test point of view. But how well does it do in terms of balancing blood sugar every day? And how well does it do in terms of getting into parasympathetic state? And how well does it do in terms of regenerating your DNA? And how well does it do in terms of absorbing your nutrients? And how well does it do to balance your neurotransmitters? And how well does it do to fight off infection? Those are things that we don't see on a blood test, that we can do little things every day to get awareness of how our body is breaking down. And that's really the key, is doing a paradigm shift and thinking about the stress. The moment that you wake up and open your eyes, there's going to be stress. There's way more chemicals ever in this world that we live in since the industrial age. But I actually just wrote a paper, and now there's this whole technology age where we have basically computers totally stimulating us every day, day in, day out, day in, day out. Text messages, alerts. I got a Snapchat. I have a new Facebook request. I have a message. I have a text. I got an email. Guess what happens? Eventually, your body gets conditioned, just like the Pavlovian dog, where you ring a bell, you give the food to the dog, and they start to salivate. And then all of a sudden, you take away the food, but you ring the bell, and the dog starts to salivate. That's called conditioning, operant conditioning. And we get conditioned by our electronics. So when you get a text, you already feel it before it even comes in, or you hear it and you got to go check it. That's creating a sympathetic response, and that sympathetic response is a permanent on button that's draining your adrenals, and that's causing your immune system to be overwhelmed, and that's causing the expression of your autoimmunity. And you're thinking, why isn't the Cytomel and the Synthroid working? It's not working because all of those other things are going on. So hopefully you're thinking a little bit differently now. I know I rambled on, and I am getting ready to leave to Europe tomorrow, so I'm super excited. Haven't even thought about it because I have been working so hard, and I will continue to work hard. I'm going to try to show you some Facebook Lives while I'm there. I'll have all the Moroccans looking at me like I'm crazy, this crazy guy talking in the middle of the streets with his arms in the air, or maybe I'll fit right in. So anyways, hopefully you guys got a lot out of this today. Hopefully I'm having you think of the adrenals a little bit differently and thinking about the thyroid a little bit differently and being mad a little bit. So anyways, hey Brittany, happy 4th of July as well. Deb, I'm glad that this is priceless information. And thank you so much for the info. I think it's pronounced Dete, Champagne Carter. If there's any other questions, James, you're awesome too, and I appreciate your thankfulness. Any other questions out there? I'd love to try to answer right now. I have one more phone call that I have to take care of today, and then we'll go from them. Do you recommend doing, Jocelyn? And then I don't see the remaining portion of the question. Have a great holiday. Hey, Paula, hope you're doing well. Hope all is well in Canada and you had a good Canadian day, or Canada Day is what they call it. And you're off today, I guess, right? You had a holiday. So hopefully that's going well. Jocelyn, you didn't finish your sentence. It says, do you recommend? And there's nothing else. Terry, brand new to your page. Such helpful info. It is awesome info, Terry. And I'm a bit crazy, but I love what I do, and my job is to give you guys information and make you scratch your head and think, why didn't my doctor ever tell me about this? Part-time thyroid support while fixing the core issues, absolutely. That could be a way to go for sure. But ultimately, I want to know why. I want to know, is there a conversion issue? Is a person's liver doing well? Is their gut health doing well? Is there an autoimmunity? Is there selenium or nutritional deficiencies? Is there a stealing away of some of the important amino acids that help the prerequisites for thyroid function? How's the HPA axis doing? Is our liver working well to break things down? Is there a methylation issue? I mean, those are all the things that I'm thinking about. Do I see patients? Absolutely. That's what I do. That's my job. I do more of a coaching program now where we're doing it from distance, but I still do see patients. Jennifer, I just joined your group today. I love learning about this kind of stuff. I try to do this stuff every week, if not a couple times a week, and I have a list of suggestions. So I know the next one that I'm going to be talking about is going to be about adrenal fatigue and candida, or I probably do adrenal fatigue and H. pylori, candida, and unhealthy gut microbiome. That would be my next topic. I got to scroll down. Sorry, Rhonda. Oh, sorry. One more thing. Brittany, is it okay for TSH to jump around in the normal range, like 0.73 up to 2.0? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you can do a blood test and you can see your glucose go high one day and low the next day, or cholesterol go high and go low. Those are the things that are going to be temperamental based on what you're doing. It's usually when they fall outside of the lab ranges that when I'm starting to scratch my head and think what's going on. Strongly, Rhonda, I feel strongly that blood tests are not always accurate, and thyroid disease may take years before showing positive in blood work. Several women I know and myself have experienced a long list, and I have to see more. I've got to press see more. A long list of thyroid symptoms, but nothing showed in the blood work for years. Endocrinologists may argue, but I stand by my experiences. Thank you, and I enjoy your holiday. Way to stand by your experiences. I agree with you. But I would probably say that they were outside of the functional ranges. And that's why we have functional ranges, because the lab ranges are so broad that maybe if you would have looked at it from a healthy range, like 1.8 to 3.0 instead of 0.4 to 4.5, you may have seen it's a little more sensitive. You would have seen that getting a C plus on your blood work was enough for us to say that I don't feel good, versus waiting for an F and saying, okay, now we got to give you some extra help. So that's where functional medicine comes into play. I'm going to answer a couple more questions. I have adrenal insufficiency secondary to pituitary tumor. I've gained too much weight and recently diagnosed with lymphedema and lipedema. What can I do? Hey, Annie, I'm sorry to hear that. Yes, I would say that you have to go down to basics. And so that means that you have to figure out what some of these immune dysregulators are. And I'd want to know your genetic test and see where some of your susceptibilities and energy blockages are, and what maybe some of your nutrient deficiencies are, and what some of the core issues are in terms of stressors that are impacting your life and how you're dealing with those, and kind of rebuild the body from the ground up. I guess that's the best answer I would give you. Hey Mariah, I hope you're doing well. How can I rebalance my hormones when I have estrogen dominance and PCOS? That's going to come down to a lot of glucose and insulin resistance. And that's going to come down to cell membrane repair and oxidative stress control and, and genetic testing, and also looking at other inflammatory problems, meaning what else is causing the inflammation. Sometime, I'm going to do a Facebook Live on Epstein-Barr virus next time as well. And we're going to talk about when you're told that you have a past exposure, it's an IgG exposure. So the doctors just blow it off. Oh, it's IgG. It doesn't mean anything. It's not meaning a problem for you. I talked to one of the foremost lecturers and researchers in the world of neuroimmunoendocrinology, Dr. Aristotle Vajani, and he owns Cyrix Labs, and he owns Immunosciences, and he's a really down-to-earth guy. And I talked to him, and he told me, he said, hey, when we do H. pylori testing, we look at IgG to determine if it's an active infection. So why is it with Epstein-Barr virus and other viruses, we look at IgM and we look at IgG as a past exposure? And the reason that is because we've found that the preference of each individual is individual specific, meaning you may produce more IgG antibodies, I may produce more IgM, someone else may produce more IgA, and if a person's dealing with exhaustion and fatigue issues and autoimmunities, and you just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, your mono was past exposure and it's not important, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It is important, and it's what needs to be dealt with. And so we need to extinguish that ember. And that's what methylation issues do. When you don't have the ability to methylate properly and extinguish the ember, all of a sudden you express an autoimmunity, or all of a sudden you have a shingles outbreak, or all of a sudden you have a herpes virus, or all of a sudden that Epstein-Barr virus that was a past exposure caught a gust of wind, and it was this little cigarette that didn't get put out, and all of a sudden you got a forest fire. It's a problem. I hope that answered your question, Mariah. Thank you. You're the best, Jocelyn. You're the best. And I still want to talk to you. Cheryl, waking up every night between 1 and 3, sometimes stay awake. Oops, it just went up. Sometimes stay awake because I'm up early. Racing mind, hot flashes, help. I'm kind of smart, but I'm not like a wizard. I need to have more information than that. But I would think maybe perimenopausal, glucose issues, stress, what's your environment like when you sleep, and what your nutritional balance is like. I'd want to know that. Jocelyn, what is the ideal TSH range again? It's 1.8 to 3.0. Thank you. How do we get the information on testing and working with patients like myself? I do a 45-minute with myself and my team. So it's not just me, but myself and my team. We do a 45-minute discovery call, figuring out what problems you're dealing with, what is working, what's not working, figure out what it is that you're looking to achieve. And then if we think we can help you bridge that gap, we'll tell you how exactly to do it. If we don't think we can, then we'll tell you that as well. And then we'll go from there. That's basically how I work with patients. Yes, I have Epstein-Barr, and it's rough. It is rough. And then lastly, I have adrenal fatigue, Epstein-Barr, MTHFR gene mutation, gut issues, chronic pressure headaches, migraines, and episode cluster headaches. What should I be taking first? That question's terrible. I'm sorry. I say that out of love, because there's no one particular supplement, obviously, that's going to fix all of that. So I guess you didn't mean it like that. I guess you were asking, what's the priority in terms of if these are all the things that I have, what should I do? That's a better question. I think that's probably what you meant. So I would put a hierarchy on that. And I'd say, what's the worst possible thing that could break down first? And I'd say it'd be the cell membrane. Then what can break down after that? Oxidative stress and ATP production. Then what can break down after that? Then I could start having tissue problems, and then I can start having organ problems, and then I can start having system problems. So I would approach it that way. It's just too hard to get into because I don't know your specific problems. Like, for example, if you were anemic and you had a macrocytic anemia and you had a iron deficiency, and I start to try to fight off a major bug, and we don't even have enough oxygen, then the first supplement would be something to up your absorption of iron or up your absorption of B12, or at least give you some oxygen so that you can start working from there. So hopefully that made sense. I didn't mean to condescend you. I didn't mean it in that way at all. But a lot of people will ask me that, like, hey, I got this, that, and the other. What's the best supplement? And it's like, go watch this again, because I just said that there's no one best supplement, and we got to fix the problem, and we got to put our head into the equation and figure out where is everything going wrong. So anyways, I gotta go because I got another appointment here at 7 o'clock. Is there one last question? If there's one last question, I will answer that. MTHFR, what supplement should I take? That's the worst last question. How about another question? The reason that's a bad question is because, again, I don't know. I don't know. MTHFR is just an enzyme that doesn't make methylfolate. So I guess the best answer to that question, Deborah, is the best food that you should take is green leafy vegetables, uncooked, spinach, romaine, Swiss chard. Get off all the folic. So become the folic acid police. Look at your supplements. Don't eat any enriched white breads or any cereals that have folic acid in it. Anything that's packaged. Go look at your supplements and see if it says folic, F-O-L-I-C, like the prenatal vitamins. And eat anything that has folate, uncooked leafy green vegetables. That's the best thing that you can do. And then this is the last one, your thoughts on the muscle testing to see what is going on. I used to do that a lot. I think that there's awesome applications for that, Deb, but I'm more of a nerd, so I like to look at the chemistry and the biology and the nutrigenomics, and then so I use that more. But I do think it can add a lot of value, especially if you're keeping your eye on the science part too, and you're getting the best of both worlds. Okay, last one. Sorry, my blood work didn't show IgM or IgG for Epstein, CMV or mycoplasma pneumonia. Just showed up being high. What showed up being high? My blood work didn't show up IgG or IgM for Epstein, CMV or mycoplasma pneumonia. Just your IgG or IgM itself was high? I don't get the question. Terry McIntyre, I am located in Boca Raton, Florida. And like I said, I Skype across the world. I actually just talked to someone from Scotland. I hope you're doing well, Jillian. That was great talking to you today. And that's it. So I hope that you guys have a great evening. I will be doing some Facebook Lives in showcasing my trip to Madrid, to Portugal, and Morocco. And I am very grateful that I have you guys to be able to help. And I am also acknowledging and celebrating that my goal is to help you as much as I can. I don't know, show either IgG or IgM. I can PM you. Yeah, PM me later. And anyways, guys, have an awesome 4th of July if you're here in the U.S. and have an awesome rest of the day. And I will talk to you guys later. Talk to you later. Bye.